Hello everyone. Culture gone very bad.
Extremely bad this week, sadly.
Yeah, and I guess that's why that will be the overarching theme of our pod today, the world events and how they are unraveling. So, JP, um, I'm not gonna lie, this is the most distressed state I had been in a long time, and I feel absolutely shattered by all the events, both personally and culturally.
Yeah, I can't really blame you for that. I can't blame you, being both a Russian and a Ukrainian as well. So this probably our listeners will not know. So would you
Yeah,
like to?
half of my family is Ukrainian, and I have family members in Ukraine right now as well. And my family in Russia is also not doing particularly great. So all the events unraveling at the terrible pace, and um, I didn't expect this war to happen. To some extent, I always thought what economics of Russia's plan gas would be, uh, more prevalent issue than some political flags. But here I go, I was wrong. Did you think with this war will happen?
I thought that something would happen because the Americans have been saying it very often, and that is because apparently they had drones that could spy on Russia, and therefore they knew that something was going to happen, and Putin was denying it. And unfortunately, when people like Putin deny things, the old psychoanalytical principle of the denial that is an affirmation it became true. And obviously him saying no just meant, yes, of course I'm gonna do it, just not now. And he waited for the end of the of the Beijing Olympics, as far as I understood, to attack.
How very Soviet of him. I have to reflect. Growing up in Russia um, in late 90s, early 2000s, and 2000s are back in fashion, right?
Yeah,
Well,
in every unfortunately in every possible way.
well, I actually think Russia in late 90s and 2000, as wild and risky as it was, it actually was a place of opportunities and sort of looking into the future. And I think it made me who I am on a cultural level, good or bad. It's, for our listeners to judge. But um, I really do not recognize the country in which I grew up and everything that has been happening there over the past 10 years. It's like some tremendous move backwards, and the future is looking really bleak. Not only for Ukrainians who, being attacked right now, and I feel absolutely awful for all the sufferings they have to experience. The future of Russia is also not looking great by demonstrating this violence and cruelty towards outside world. No country is going to get anywhere, and I feel like we discussed earlier today, off the record, Russia is going for neo-Nazism direction, and there's so closely linked correlations with Hitler regime and his stance. And we were watching this video just now with Putin. He clearly is not well.
Yeah, but some people in our society, unfortunately, they thrive when they have specific psychosis. British Tunnelis in American Psycho is a good demonstration of it. So people thrive when they have certain psychosis, because certain psychosis like narcissism, for instance, hinge upon the fact that other people love you and that you have an appeal to other people, and that's very in a very fucked up way that can benefit a leader. So leaders have very specific personality traits. Can I ask you not to turn to my side, because the computer doesn't recognize you and the screen goes dark and it looks like I'm alone.
You see, Drippy, that's you see, Drippy, that's the reality, right? I'm split between two nationalities, so computer doesn't recognize me. We live in a moment where you have to be on a side. If you don't take a stance, you're going to be cancelled. And I hope a KGB, considering all the events, is not going to get cancelled.
Except there is one case in which a brand, in order not to be cancelled, in order not to be cancelled, doesn't take a stance, which is what I've seen in fashion. I've seen a lot of timid reactions from fashion. The most they can do is saying, I support peace. But that's something that even the Russians right now who support Putin could say. In fact, even Putin didn't call it a war, call it a special military exercise or something. Oh Lord, disappeared. So I think it's even Putin didn't use the word war. It's like when in the 90s the Americans said that they were going to export democracies. It was not war. So everybody is against war, but I didn't see the brands getting very much involved in this case, which I found very peculiar, because they were very, very quick in jumping on every political and social matter over the last a couple of years, and it looked like we didn't even know who we were and how to vote unless a big corporation and a big brand would tell us how to vote and what the right opinion and the acceptable position was. And you remember that we talked about once even here about the brands and many designers writing very specific posts against in support of the law in Italy to protect the LGBT community. But the law, even though the law was very, very badly written and put together, and they were still commenting on it. It looked like you could not have an opinion about it unless a brand lectured you about it. Now the brands are lecturing nobody about the Russian situation, and my fear is that they're not doing so because a lot of Russian rich people buy fashion, and they're very scared about it. So obviously my problem is not the brands are not speaking now. My problem is that the brands have spoken in the past. Now, I would say that corporations do not need to speak more. They need to speak less, and they need to stop lecturing people. Or they do it consistently, and then in this case, they should have done it as well.
But I'll be honest, because of everything, I kind of missed many fashion news over the past few days. Just can you give a brief outline? So what sort of message are fashion brands outlining in regards to their stance? Okay,
fashion brands, whereas after when Black Lives Matter started, you remember that all fashion brands straight away, even before understanding the position of the movement, Black Lives Matter, the political position of the movement, which was an anti-capitalist movement, and they were capitalist institutions, so it was even a contradictory thing, but they all posted in support of Black Lives Matter straight away, without much analysis. And the same about other things regarding, for instance, the LGBT rights. I didn't see much brands taking stands lately, and now we are in the middle of fashion weeks. So now is Milan Fashion Week, and from, I think, Tuesday, Paris Fashion Week starts, and I didn't see much movement. Actually, what I saw was that brands have proposed their own collections, especially, for instance, Moschino did a very iconic collection, ugly but iconic collection, inspired by 2001 Space Odyssey by Stanley Kubrick. And it was very costumey as usual, very ironic, etc. And obviously, brands have two ways to respond to periods of crisis when they are confronted by journalists. One is to say, we went very simple and very understated because we are channeling the moment and we want to be somber, and that's one excuse. Or a brand like Moschino, their reaction is, yeah, because of the war, we are taking an escapistic, we are embracing escapism and we are giving people a break. So we are doing these fantasy collections because we want people to enjoy the moment. So as you can see, they create whatever they want, and they will find justification after to justify whatever they want. And it works both ways, because you can justify a crazy collection by saying I'm offering you escapism, or you can justify a non-crazy collection by offering, you know, a somber state.
Yeah, but I
No,
think
the point is, and just to conclude, the point is that all these collections, none of these collections reflect this moment, for the simple fact that they were designed in a different time and age when this war didn't exist. So the collections are usually researched and designed 18 to 24 months in advance. So there was no way they could know about this, but they still comment on the moment, because fashion is about the present always. But they were very timid on their social media for what I've seen about taking a stance.
But I don't know, like, how can you, God, like, yeah, no one wants war unless you have extreme kick like American Psycho style aesthetic, or like, you know, psychological perception. The thing is, you probably said it, the only thing you can say, we support peace in this relation. You can't really say we support a particular country, or what do you get models to wear specific country flags, what sort of expectations you had?
Absolutely. No. My expectation was not, that's my whole point. I don't think that they should have behaved differently in this instance. My problem is that they do it only in certain situations. My point is that they did it in this situation. They had a very careful point of view in this situation because they don't want to mess up their relationship with the rich Russians who buy fashion. So that's my feeling. My problem is that they didn't apply the same care and the same distance to other situations. You know what I mean? They were very quick in jumping to very specific analysis on other social and political situations. But then when customers are involved, like Russian customers in this case, then they back up and they are very, very cautious.
So I am
saying the brands should lecture us a little bit less on our political stances and on the list of good and bad that should be given by the Bible, if one believes in God, or by the Torah, or by the Quran, if one believes in God, not by fashion brands.
But hold on, Drip, as far as I understand, no one is lecturing anything at all. We're not taking any political stance. So therefore, what is happening exactly what you expect?
Yes, but what I'm saying is that this is what brands should always do. Mm-hmm. So what I'm saying is I find very weird that in the past they didn't do this, but now they are doing it.
So maybe it takes war to change fashion.
No, it doesn't take war. It depends who goes to war, because I didn't see the same care when the war was between Israel and Palestine last year. So my point is that they don't apply the same standard of political involvement to every situation. And this demonstrates one thing, that fashion only pretends to be moral, when in fact, even morality is a tool to sell more clothes. Well, and this is the demonstration of this.
I would take it even further. I think a lot of people in society pretend to be moral only as long as it benefits them. But probably, you know, when we have to look at us, we can all identify moments of hypocrisy in our behavior. Well, speaking of moral and moral gestures, I would like to talk about new TV series on Netflix, Inventing Anna.
Yes, another Russian, by the way.
Another Russian, yes, so we'll probably...
Another fucked up Russian.
I mean, aren't we all fucked up in one way or another?
Yes. Actually, watching the TV show, okay, do you want to introduce it, please? But then I'll tell you afterwards.
Yeah. So the twist series narrative is based on a real person who is, I think she's Russian immigrant, Anna Sorokin, and she moved, I think, to London, then Germany, and then New York, and she created a persona called Anna Delvey, and she claimed to be a wealthy heiress from prominent Russian heritage, and she managed to scam lots of financial institutions, hospitality industries, individuals into borrowing her money, paying for her bills, or not paying for anything at all and just taking loans. And she managed to do it convincingly for an extended period of time. And she created a completely made up story, which people across different levels have bought into and didn't question until when it was too late in a way. But when is it too late? Is it ever too late?
Yeah. And watching the series, and this is exactly another of those cases that I was talking about before, where your fucked up personality, meaning personality disorder, can be the most beneficial thing up to a certain point, because you become high functioning. There are certain numbers of high functioning.
Do you think current politics can make some individuals more high functioning right now?
No, I think that the opposite, that high functioning diseases, mental diseases or psychiatric diseases can actually make you a better politician. More efficient. Now, to see the other side of the spectrum, you can see, speaking about spectrums, for instance, in the case of autism, certain autistic people become amazing scientists. Okay, and that's the good side of it. But there are psychiatric disorders in which, like for instance, certain psychosis, not psychosis, but certain even sociopaths that become very, very cold, like Anna in the TV show. Very, very cold, very, very determined, very, very calculating.
Oh, Drippy, I certainly recognize myself in this description. Oh, dangerous.
Well, I'm jealous then, because while watching the series, the only thing I could think of was, I want to be this girl. I want to be able to manage to throw myself into the situations and come out handling them well. Eventually, she could not obviously manage it.
I mean, I guess there is a limit to any scam. You know what we say? You have to know when it's time to leave the party.
Yeah, exactly. And this is what she didn't know.
Yeah, but frankly, I absolutely agree with you. I do admire her. I think there's a big comment about our society. We live in a very exploitive society. People, systems, governments, politics abuse us on so many levels. And if you go into this system and you abuse it, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. Maybe when it comes to specific individuals should treat it and the way she approached it, it can be challenging. But in a way, this system is very brutal to all of us, so why do we have to be gentle in it? And I think she did a lot of smart things, and maybe you mentioned it correctly, I guess, like this ability to switch of emotions and connections and empathy facilitated it.
Yeah.
And
that's the thing. So empathy can have two extremes. The 0 degree empathy is when people have the ability of reducing empathy to zero. And psychologists and neuroscientists who study on empathy, they know that empathy can reduce, but every time that empathy reduces, something else increases. And what increases is the ability of not paying attention to people, but paying attention to things, which is the reason why.
What things?
For instance, science. Okay, so if you have low degree of empathy, chances are that you are able to pay attention to for instance, maths or any science much more.
Amazing.
Which is the reason why certain high-functioning autistic people can be amazing scientists, because their degree of interpersonal understanding is reduced. Their empathy is reduced because they cannot understand the other, but they can understand things, science, the functioning of machines, for instance, or numbers, etc.
Tell me, have you ever experienced 0 level of empathy?
0, no, but I did the
0.1.
Yeah, exactly. I did the empathy test, and I scored pretty low. Yes.
Wow, I will be very curious to do one. Could you send me a link?
I can do it with you.
Okay.
I did it with another friend of mine, and she came very low, which is peculiar, because normally women have higher degree of empathy than men from an average scale. However, there is another type of 0 degree empathy, which is totally different from the autistic, which is the psychotic.
We should find it from Anna.
Like narcissists, for instance.
We should find it from Anna and compare our empathy levels to her, and then see what chances of success in New York you and I might have.
Exactly. Very low in my case, I think, because I am not the psychotic type. I think I am more towards the autistic 0 degree empathy type rather than the determined and cold psychotic psychotic.
Oh, I have another person in mind, the former KGB agent who can score very interesting results. So maybe, GP, I would be very interesting to place you, myself, Anna, and Putin on a score and find out.
You see, Putin probably is 0 degree.
He probably -5.
He probably would establish a new record in the empathy scale.
That would be very interesting criteria. And then I have another question. What do you think potential of low empathy and interaction of individual with fashion industry can become?
I think the fashion industry, you have to have low degrees of empathy. Because if you didn't, first, because it's a business based on superficial relationships, a business that is constantly moving, and you always upload the latest person. You always upload people based on their latest collection. It didn't matter how great you were 2 years ago.
And what about art? What do you think? Art and empathy.
Well, art, okay, I'll tell you, I'll give you 2 examples in art of what I see as empathy. So you have, for instance, in photography, you have 2 traditions. Photography has been considered art since the 80s. Technically speaking, sold in the same environments as art galleries, etc. When the big format, the big pictures, when they develop techniques to print big pictures, this is what one idea that is documented by Charlotte Cotton, who is a very great historian of photography as art. Now, in photography, you have 2 big traditions, that I love both. One is the empathic tradition of Nan Goldin. So you have those 1990s pictures of Nan Goldin, even, what's the name of that? Jürgen Teller. This very empathetic tradition in which the photographer abolishes every barrier between them and their subject. Okay, and for instance, Nan Goldin, to do so, she uses the snapshots, and she is looking for abolishing any medium. Sometimes she takes pictures of herself being beaten up by her boyfriend, of people having sex. Every barrier is abolished between. So that's true empathy. That's absolute empathy. And I think Nan Goldin is the main agent of this in art. And
do you think it's invasive as well? Like,
I think the greatness of Nan Goldin is that she can intrude any situation without coming across as invasive. So that's why it's empathetic. That's why it's empathy, because you don't perceive it as violent. You perceive it. She connects with you. That's what empathy is. And then you have the opposite tradition, the one that goes under the definition of deadpan photography. And that is best explained by photographers Candida Oefer, which is fantastic, and Andreas Gerschke. And they're both Germans, surprise, surprise. And their photography is deadpan because it doesn't rely upon emotions. It doesn't seek to transmit any emotions. It doesn't mean that you cannot, as an individual, feel emotions while watching it, but it's not what they are seeking to do. The concept and the structure and the beauty. Actually, in Andreas Gerschke, and also in Candida Oefer, you never see people. It's always buildings. And if you see people, they are dots in a crowd. They are never individuals. So there is a reduction of empathy because it's called deadpan photography. It's looking to abolish that human contact. It's the opposite to me.
Well, I mean, this is very fascinating, right?
I probably should, I just thought about this now because you mentioned it, but I probably should write something about this.
Well, it's a very profound idea, but I'm incredibly fascinated by how different levels of empathy can create transcendent art or some sort of expression, like, for example, what you just described in this photography. And it is fascinating what a very cold and distant approach to the craft can bring results which will be admired by many. And simultaneously, like Nan Goldin photography, some can find it very disturbing, even though, like you said, level of empathy can be high.
You see, finding something disturbing is precisely connected with empathy, because you find something disturbing only if you can identify with something. If you can't identify with something, it cannot disturb you, really. It can disgust you.
Do you identify with Anna?
No, I am jealous of Anna. I am jealous of her. So I look at the show and I say, why don't I have this? It's not, I don't think she is necessarily more intelligent than we are, but she's very determined. And in order to get to her goal, she's ready to endure, to like, to kill people, even.
You know what I think,
Speaking.
what maybe supported her, and this is what I read, when it all happened, I read a lot of research because I was incredibly fascinated. I do find it very, very peculiar and mesmerizing what she has managed to do. But what I read, she was very good at presenting herself with inextricable level of confidence, ability to mesmerize people and influence them, and always have incredibly convincing ways. This can take you very far. And literally, this is what I say, like, you know, fake it all the way. She really was good at pretending and creating the sense of genuine authority and some sort of story behind her, like creating this narrative. Because look, we as human beings, we are very good at communicating, and that's what unites us. Look, this is what you and I do in our podcast. We tell stories. And if you are good at creating stories and you're able to create ambience like Anna did, which decorates your story, it is very believable and a lot of people will buy it. And you can tell me, well, there are many caveats to that. Well, I'll tell you, Anna's story is a proof of that. What mythologies, stories, and narrative really lead human beings in many directions.
Yeah, and this is very true. By the way, just before I pass to my other analysis about this, where do you think you stand in this empathy scale? What do you think about yourself and empathy?
You know, Juppie, I don't know if there is a terminology about, maybe with your degrees you will be able to point me out in the right direction or in the right institution. I think with empathy, I have two options. I sometimes feel like I can have very high empathy. Like, for example, with some events which are happening in the world, I can really imagine and place myself in the shoes of both sides and what is happening in a world conflict. Simultaneously, some instances and daily experiences, I feel like my empathy can be zero. And I sometimes find myself like one of these Bret Easton characters functioning in this world, but not connected.
Can you give an example of this?
An example of low empathy.
Yeah.
I don't know, I guess when someone can be struggling on a professional level with some sort of basic duties, or, I don't know, being on time. For example, for me, I think time management is quite straightforward, and I find it very surprising when others can't be on time and can't plan their day, and I find it very difficult.
I feel offended.
Do I feel offended?
No, I feel offended.
You feel offended.
Yeah, because I'm always late when I come here. And I'm joking.
Let's put it this way. I have zero empathy towards your lateness.
Okay.
So this is my answer, which, you know what, Juppie, I guess I don't like to put myself in my own criteria. So I would say in one criteria. So I would say my levels of empathy are subjective, dependent on circumstances I'm experiencing.
Yeah, totally. I was asking because I was looking to specify, because empathy, large part of empathy is inherited. So the ability to be empathetic is inherited.
Well, maybe because my background is split between two nations.
And some part of it is actually not inherited, but is determined by, for instance, political instances. So, for instance, the empathy of Germans during Nazism was very different from the empathy of Germans today, of course, because the political situation reduced it. And there are many studies on empathy and during Nazism, especially what Nazis were doing to prisoners. So yeah, it can be determined by religion, by because, for instance, the first time I remember, I come from a small village, and the first time I saw a homeless person in the street, I felt so sorry for that person. I was about to cry because I was not used. I've never seen that situation. Now I realize that I see homeless people, and I am not it's very nasty to say this, but it's true. I look at them and I feel for them, but I take it as something that happens. Something that happens. It's not that I don't feel sorry for them. I do feel sorry for them. And I would like them to have a better life. But I don't think I think it's something inevitable to a certain extent. And this is not because it is inevitable. This is because living in a city has somehow reduced my sensitivity to the specific situation.
Big city and these hectic networks, they create this sort of set where we see people around us, events, dramas, and violence and cruelty as decorations, which are not concerning us in any way. You're absolutely right. We become desensitized and we just accept things like, you know, almost like a traffic lights. It is just what it is. We just go through them, and we know really well our ways around this city life, and we know how to act in these circumstances, which, like you said, if we have our memory and experience erased and we to come across these situations first time again in our life, we would be absolutely struck and taken aback. But now we just know how to handle them. We don't even acknowledge the extreme circumstances.
So now psychologists are creating, it's very popular now to do empathy training. I probably, after watching Inventing Anna, I should invent also the
Anna training.
The empathizing training, like to make people a little bit more. But did you know about, I don't know if you know about this.
Autism University.
No, because that's the thing. You don't want to reduce okay, so we can explain this because this is interesting. You can lack empathies in two different ways. One is the autistic way, and one is the psychotic way. So the autistic person lacks empathy, not in the sense that they don't feel, that they don't love others. Autistic people can be very loving people. So this is not the way in which their empathy is low. Their empathy is low because they can't read other people's emotions. They can't understand how complicated emotions in other people are. And they reduce everything to numbers and science, okay? But they are able to love. For instance, many autistic people have a lot of pets, and they are able to love pets. Whereas
cat ladies are autistic.
Exactly, cat ladies. Whereas the psychotic type of lack of empathy is very different because they do have an emotion. They do have an intellectual empathy. They do understand other people's emotions. What they lack is the ability of emotionally connecting, of feeling for other people, the opposite of autistic people. So autistic people don't understand other people, your feelings from a rational point of view, but they can feel you in a way. Whereas psychotic people, they can feel you, but they don't care about you. So it's the opposite way of being zero degree empathy, which is why psychotic people can, and we have recent experience of this, can handle you. Psychotic people can make you do things because they understand, because to some degree they understand you very well. So they don't lack intellectual empathy, they just lack emotional empathy. They understand you, and they can somehow move your strings. Is it clear? The two different 0 degree.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. It makes sense. I think it also makes me realize human mind is mind-blowing. Well, no pun intended. But honestly, it is. Like the spectrums of personalities, perceptions, and how we human beings, by simple things, manipulations, little phrases, hints, and body language can influence each other and make each other do some wild things sometimes we would have never done unless we would be under influence of particular mindset or behavior.
Yeah.
Super tricky. You know, another thing about Anna, I think also why it was so convincing. I guess she really was started in this highbrow culture of fashion designers, which have some substance behind them, a lot of black color, like we spoke before, you know, this fashion intellectual flair. And also art, like her main agenda was that she was trying to open some art fund. Again, I guess we often associate scammers with low culture, you know, cheap ways to get rich fast, like, you know, I don't know, cryptocurrencies, buy a lottery ticket or invest in this. what she was doing, it's sort of a old classic heritage aristocracy,
Exactly.
very, very cultured and intelligentsia aesthetic. And this is why people bought it so much. So, you know, the more obvious scam is, the better they buy it, like in a way of just targeting something you know well. It's like almost human reliance on nostalgia and lived experience. Because if you suddenly go to New York and say, oh, I have this digital startup and we will invent, I mean, Elizabeth Holmes did it with blood testing, but hey ho. Like here specifically, I really think it succeeded. And even in TV series, we outlined it so well. She communicated some sort of a taste and aesthetic, which people associate with old money. And that's why they trust it, because it seems like a lived experience, something we had seen before.
Exactly. Do you remember that? This is said by the designer in the show. He says she had a perfect taste, and you cannot fake that taste. It's either with you. You are either grew up with it, or you can't really pretend to have it, because the details are so spot on. It's what makes the difference between a snob and a true person of taste. And do you remember the first artwork that she talks about in the series?
No, remind me.
So basically, she talks about a Cindy Sherman picture. And in that moment, it's almost a description of herself, because after all, Cindy Sherman became famous for taking pictures of herself disguised as somebody else. Always, you know, the Untitled Stills and even the later works is always herself disguised as somebody else. So,
JP, do you think we are ever true selves in any circumstances?
Very good question. Okay, so I am really writing something about this for our research evening, by the way.
Our research evening.
Yeah,
I'm looking forward to it.
About fashion and self-expression, which, by the way, I believe is not.
Especially if suddenly everyone on Zoom meetings switches on their cameras and we see everyone is in their pajamas and naked. So
exactly. So yeah, exactly. So it's like saying, so what happened in this situation? Where is yourself? If you're wearing a hijab? Can we be our true selves? There are many explanations of this. I think there are two different types of selves. There is an individual self, and then there is a social self. And the social self is usually, and this is, Russia shows this very well in this moment, the social self in Western societies and in non-Asian societies, because there are differences, is always divided between you always form your own identity in differential terms. You are you because you're different from somebody else. Okay, so you are,
in contrast.
Yeah, in contrast. This is how we form group identities in the West. And this is because even the group is the extension of the individual in a way, is a bigger idea of individual. So this is the social self. So there is an individual self, there is a social self, and that's, and that to me already complicates the situation, because what is your true self? The problem is the true self. Okay, there are some sociologists like Goffman who don't believe that true self exists, because every time you appear in public, you're wearing a mask, and you have many masks.
But this is a condition of us in a social aspect. But in the end of the day, when we are in absolute absorbing experience of loneliness by ourselves, and we look at ourselves in the mirror, are we ever true selves, or we still continuing to perform and project some ideas from literature, films, popular culture, I don't know, a philosophy which we read about, and we are performing with people?
Yeah.
Or are we ever actually let go of all these labels and identities and just take ourselves for who we are? I always question that.
You see, according to psychoanalysis, and especially Lacan, you know that Lacan, I don't know if you know, because you don't have to know it. Lacanian psychoanalysis.
I know nothing. I'm just, a confused woman, female.
Yeah, confused woman in the world.
Distressed, female in distress in the middle of international political conflict.
So Lacanian psychoanalysis is based on one idea. Lacan proposed this theory, which is not proven, but is an interesting theory, which is called the mirror phase. You are yourself. You perceive yourself as a whole human being by identifying with your mother. Essentially, your true self is always based on the image of somebody else. So exactly what you're saying. Because when you're a child, you don't perceive yourself as an individual until you look at your mother's face or you look in the mirror. That's what's called the mirror stage. It is only before the mirror that you realize that your hands, your arms, your legs, and your feet are all connected. Before that stage, Lacan says, there is no idea of unified self. You perceive yourself as a fragmented body that doesn't come together. It takes an image, which is called imaginary. Okay, it takes an image to make yourself perceive a totality about yourself. So the true self exists. Well, I don't know if the true self exists, but obviously, I think it's more splintered. Also, the idea of self didn't exist as we understand it today up until the 16th century. That's the moment in which the idea of self and identity emerged. It didn't really exist, so it's historically determined to some extent.
You know what? Coming back to present modern days, I put it this way. If I would find myself in Anna's shoes, and well, who knows, maybe one day you and I will, I would be tempted to repeat what she has done, even though you do end up in prison, but on the brighter side, you get the Netflix deal.
Yeah, exactly. Because did she do a deal with them?
Did she do what?
Did she close a deal with them?
Yes, yes.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I
didn't
think
finish the series yet.
Yeah, well, that's how like the series came out. So yeah, I think essentially.
I mean, she is a true. I wanted to tell you, I don't know because this is a bordering on gossip, but did you know that?
Oh, we love gossip.
We love gossip, yeah, but allegedly, Anne Hathaway's boyfriend was one of them. Do you know the story?
One of whom?
Do you know the story of Anne Hathaway's boyfriend? Now, guys, double check on Google because I don't want
We have to fact check that.
We have to fact check, but what I remember is this, and my memory can be misled right now because I don't want to give you wrong information, but essentially Anne Hathaway years ago was with this boy, and this boy was an Italian, very handsome, and he was allegedly very rich, upper class, and there are pictures of them together, posing together in all the important parties all around the world. And then one day she finds out that the guy that she thought was a businessman, and essentially like Anna, a rich Italian handsome businessman, was a scam. He went to New York pretending to be an Italian cardinal and convincing businessmen to invest in the Vatican Bank through him. So that's the way he was making money. So
so we all are scammers. Well, maybe.
Yeah, and also there is the Tinder swindler, the other series.
Oh yeah,
that
I heard
didn't
about
watch.
that.
It's full of these guys, and I am the only one left with a normal job and worrying about my pension and paying my taxes and being a respectable citizen and
wow, Juppie, check you out. You're so wholesome.
I am. Yeah, no, I am. No, I'm not wholesome. I'm a dickhead. Apparently, I'm the last of a kind.
Oh.
I want to stop being a respectable person.
Juppie, I'll put a theory forward. I believe whole society is a bit of a scam jungle. I think we all participate in that. Like, look, we all, like both you and I, we're both a bit of a scammers. We do our podcast talking about culture, pretending we know something and we have a stance, do we? Or we just make stuff up?
And also, we deal with fashion. We teach fashion. We don't know anything. We are shallow people. We are very superficial and frivolous.
Frivolous, and all we say needs to be fact-checked, and probably we also need to be cancelled. And especially us being linked to KGB, it's a very precarious situation for our podcast. I almost feel like we're on the edge of Joe Rogan Experience, kind of.
Exactly. Juppie Rogan.
Juppie Rogan.
Joe Sauschkina and Juppie Rogan.
That's it. Indeed. I feel like Joe Rogan Experience is not that far for us.
I don't understand why people are trying to get him cancelled.
I really like how now Spotify next to each episode of Joe Rogan has this little note, get some COVID advice, and it takes you to some medical advice about COVID. You know what? I think the thing about Joe Rogan, it's very painful for many to see success. for some reason, I think in many cultures and in many individuals, to see someone doing well, even like on another level, it's just like very difficult to celebrate someone else's success. I think there is some problem with that. And Joe Rogan managed to become bigger than a lot of media channels. And I mean, not to criticize any musician and any sort of artist, but no big celebrities love Spotify. These were artists from bygone eras who cancelled it. So, you know, it never the big personality or successful, like truly contemporary successful individual who says, oh, I'm gonna go and scrutinize another successful person. It always people who didn't get it the same way a person who were scrutinizing got it. And it really just shows that we have some issues with celebrating others and living in a society where we support each other. We are obsessed with bringing each other down more and more. And I think even this conflict between Russia and Ukraine and the world, I think it really separates our world even more into camps of who is right and who needs to be cancelled.
Yeah, totally. I mean, with Joe Rogan, the thing is, I don't like people speaking about the COVID without having, I don't know, a background for doing so.
I mean, we all have background on the COVID only for the past 2 years.
Yeah, no, I mean, advising people. What I mean is, I don't like propaganda against.
Oh,
vaccines,
you don't like propaganda,
I don't like people who do not that for a job, who are not experts on vaccines, talking about vaccines. That I don't like. But the point is not this. The point is another. When I see podcasts taking those stances, even podcasts that I love, I simply don't watch those episodes. I simply don't.
I think
so, I don't wish them to be cancelled. I just don't watch them myself.
This is what
I don't want to tell other people what not to watch. I'm not the police who needs to tell people. Nobody is not even the police should tell people what podcasts not to air. Like, we live in a free society. That's the whole point of living in a free society. And if you don't like something, don't watch it. It's called democracy. Don't watch it. I don't watch it.
Just skip it.
Just skip it. I do that. You can do that. Oh, unless you consider society as a bunch of stupid people who will not get vaccinated just because some podcast say so. But actually, the numbers of the numbers of people who believed in vaccines proves the opposite. That this podcast did not really change the destiny of anyone, but I think silencing them would give you the impression that they have some secret sort of knowledge that the system doesn't want you to get, and it would be worse. So I always believe that ideas should be heard, even stupid ideas, even painful ideas, even ideas that we don't like.
You know, I was thinking in terms of war. Of course, it's tricky. Many lives are being affected and ruined, and a lot of things are really shifting into how we would not have anticipated them before. But obviously, we always try to see some, end in this dark tunnel, some sort of I don't think it's appropriate to say positive implication, but can there be something that we can learn and take away from this experience? And I went to a new exhibition at Tate Modern.
Oh yeah, I see. Also.
Yeah, about surrealists. And obviously surrealism, it's such a common art movement, which I think influenced our whole life and whole culture. Like, I'm sure there will be lots of fashion collections, current season, next season, and every next season about surrealism. Our whole world is surreal. What we are going through right now, it's surreal. But beyond that, what made me think, surrealism was very a response to oppressive regimes in a society and individuals' disagreement with where these regimes are taking them. And I thought, coinciding with these events, I think this exhibition literally opened on the day the war began. And I just thought, as much as I despised everything that was happening, surrealism is a great artistic movement to correlate as an expression of disagreement and disappointment with how things are turning out to be. Of course, it's a bit of escapism. Of course, it's this subversive way of subtly criticizing the leading narrative and coming up with your own projections of your experiences and contemplations on how we can see things differently, how we can reinvent ways of how society is functioning. And despite all the losses and drama, this exhibition made me think what there will be a lot of art created as an outcome of expression of desperation and tragedy which society is going through.
I think fashion has really started this process with Daniel Rosberry at Schiaparelli, because he's really able, for the first time since the brand is back, he's really bringing Schiaparelli back to its surrealist origins. And I do agree, like it's the usual way to, I think Surrealism and Dada have been they have left more seeds than Cubism did in current society. Because Dada is the nonsense, and it's what all the artists try to replicate, you know, for instance.
Dada is our life.
Yeah, exactly. Nonsense, but nonsense in Dada, and this is the reason why most contemporary creators get it wrong. They think that nonsense is the lack of meaning, whereas, and this is, I'm citing Foucault, nonsense is not the lack of meaning, is the excess of meaning that cannot be contained by the artwork, and therefore it's nonsense because it's uncontainable, it's unbridled meaning. It's too much meaning that cannot be contained, and therefore it's nonsense. Whereas today is nonsense of lack of logic and lack of sense. But if I think about what's the name, Maurizio Catalan, that's Dada. If I think about all the Jeff Koons, all the contemporary, that's all replication of Dada. And in fashion, the main one is not even Dada, it's Surrealism. It left very heavy seeds, but not Surrealism as the surrealist, the original. By the way, was the exhibition about the original surrealists of the movement, or did they put into the exhibition even a proto-surrealists that did not have anything to do with the movement, like De Chirico and Frida Kahlo?
It was very interesting exhibition because I did watch some videos on Tate website before going there. I didn't research the subject, but for some reason I anticipated it to be traditional surrealist outlining. And of course we did have André Breton and his Surrealist Manifesto as the beginning, but actually what we have done, they blended most recognized figures in surrealism together with international surrealists across the world, and I actually managed to discover a lot of artists.
Okay, so that's not really surrealism.
It's more like
that's surrealism in the eye of the beholder. It was not the surrealist group around the manifesto.
No, it was, I would say, probably the dissemination of surrealism across the world. And also it was very interesting. The period we covered one from 20s to 70s. So some of it was very, very far-fetched. But I think it also was very context curated, I would say.
Right.
A lot of very specific, but you also get to see some fantastic traditional art pieces from surrealism. I think it was quite refreshing to demonstrate how much surrealism is integrated into all our culture experiences.
Yeah, that's the problem, because surrealism is something that has to do with human unconscious. We are talking about disagreement in surrealism. Actually, I think surrealism is the perfect example of disagreement, because the first disagreement that surrealism deals with is the disagreement between you and your own self. In other words, between your conscious and your unconscious. This is what surrealism is about, bringing the unconscious to light. Like with Magritte and Dali especially. But the thing is that labeling everything as surrealist is a bit of a wrong operation to me, because surrealist for me is the first ones who claims to be surrealist, because otherwise, for instance, De Chirico he came 10 years before surrealism, but also he always refused to be paired with them. I don't know Frida Kahlo's stance on this, but she was very often associated with them, but she was not part of the initial group. And I've seen even curators saying that Hieronymus Bosch and the Garden of Earthly Delights is surrealist, but Hieronymus Bosch was the opposite of surrealism. He was being realist because he was painting a true, actual reality, which was heaven and hell. So that to him was fact, was not interpretation of fact, was not the unconscious, was the fact. So he's the farther away. So that's the danger with calling surrealist things that look surrealist, but are not actually created under the ethos of surrealism. So that's the problem when surrealism is in the eye of the beholder, as opposed to in the intentions of the artist. That
yeah, it's we can endlessly criticize this exhibition.
No, I want to watch it. You did convince me. I was just questioning the idea of surrealism.
No, I think curation, no. I would change question because there are also a lot of colonial references and how colonialism and surrealism were involved. A lot of very particular narratives. And I never seen so much text in the exhibition at Tate ever. I think they really wanted to communicate their idea of curation, but also it almost implied that people would not be able to build their own references. But it's a great exhibition, and I think you and I, we should go and see it.
Yeah.
Because you know what, never judge candy until you open the
cover.
Yeah,
totally.
Until
totally.
you eaten it, yeah.
You definitely convinced me to watch it, to visit it.
Well, we shall go. And I will say, in the world of Dali, art is a light which shows us the truth. And I do hope some things will become more obvious and clear, and it will not all end in chaos of nuclear weapons and destructions. And even though culture has gone so bad, we can say it can always go back to the previous mediocre level, so we can resume.
Exactly. These times make you wish we were more mediocre. As whenever I look at movies of the early 2000s or late 90s, that's the golden age. I always see these movies and I think, oh my gosh, the world is so simple back then.
You get to know, Jupi. This is what people say.
Exactly. Yes.
Oh well, Jupi. Any last reflections?
No, same as you. I hope that this chaos will end and this war will fade away.
And I thought we stop identifying with nations and countries and identify with human beings and realize we all are united and connected. And we all are, as cliche as it sounds, it's a common world and we all need to live together and help each other and support each other and not diminish and be cruel to each other.
I wish I could be as optimistic as you are.
Well, I'm just hoping for the best, but expecting the worst.